We have an excellent returning guest to the show. We're going to talk what do we need to see week one? What's it like calling games in Camp Randall? And students get into the seats. Let's get a different perspective on that. Today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Really excited to hear this is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. I like this guest. This guest was great last year. We got excellent feedback. We're bringing in Krissy Birdsall again. She's going to be calling the Western Michigan-Wisconsin game. Krissy, thank you so much for stopping by again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Super excited to get back on campus. It's moving week right now for the freshmen. I came in on Saturday, and I'm excited to get back to Camp Randall and get back to Badgers sports. I'm entering my senior year, so it's going to be an exciting one.
Let's talk about this because you were on last summer. We talked about Luke Fickell. We talked about the vibes. What does it feel like on campus now? Does it feel a little more subdued than last year, or is it similar?
I would say that the excitement is still very high. I think it's a little bit more managed. I think last year, Luke Fickell coming in, you're bringing in all these transfers. There was so much turnaround. You're bringing in these new coordinators. Nobody knows what to expect. So they're going to stay really optimistic. This year, I think everyone's a little more realistic, but there's still a lot of optimism around. It kind of reminds me of women's basketball a little bit when Marissa Mosley came in. Year one, you don't really know what's going on. You're trying to figure things out. Year two is when things start to click a little bit. And especially with how many changes to the offense, how many changes to the defense have been going on. I'm excited to see those changes start to really take an effect on the field and, of course, off the field as well. So I've seen predictions as low as 5-7. I've seen predictions as high as like 10-2. It really just depends on what the person is saying, but I'm a little bit more on the realistic side. I think they'll be 7-5, 8-4. I know we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but I think that it's going to be a really good year for this team. Obviously, a lot of big time opponents coming in with all of the transfer portals, all of the conference realignment coming in. And these games, especially the ones at Camp Randall, are going to be a whole lot of fun.
Well, let's talk about that. I also want to dive into this next topic. What is it like calling games in Camp Randall?
It is absolutely electric. I've been fortunate enough to call, I think, 3 games. This will be my 4th game. And I usually do color. This time I'm doing play-by-play. So that's going to be an exciting change for me. But it's really cool to see the environment from a different perspective. We're sitting up in the press box, which does shake, in fact, during jump around. One of the weirdest feelings that you'll ever experience in your life. But seeing the students come in, seeing the fans get rowdy, seeing them do the wave and cheering on their team and just watching the plays from a different perspective, it's really interesting to see. And then obviously calling the games, there's so much prep, there's so much work that goes into it. And I work here at WSUM or Student Radio. I'm actually in the studio right now. And the work that these students put into every single one of these games is absolutely phenomenal. And they do a really good job. I mean, we're a pre-professional broadcast group, but I feel like a lot of these broadcasters, you're going to see them in a few years down the line, either calling Badgers games for some other network or just calling some other colleges as well. So I'm very proud of what this team has been able to do the last few years.
How do you determine who gets what games? Because listen, you got Oregon this year at home, Penn State, Bama. Do you guys just like fight this out? How do you figure that out?
I would say our sports directors do a really good job. Vince Hesperich is our sports director right now. Anthony Winker, I know you had him on the show last year. He was our sports director the year before. They've done a really good job of implementing a system that is fair and gives people the opportunities that they deserve. So usually seniority is a big factor in it. Obviously, how involved you are in the station is another big factor, and what games you want to do. All of that goes into, how this all works. I would say for the biggest games, especially ones like Alabama, I think the interest, because so many students wanted to go sit in the student section for it, that they actually were struggling to find people to do it because it's such a big game that everyone wants to be in that environment, cheering on their team. So I know we got the people that are calling the game, they're going to do a really good job. But that was an interesting one because it's such a big game that they're like, oh, is College Game Day coming? We know that Fox Big Noon is going to be here. So a lot of people want to be in those environments as well. And balancing that student life versus a broadcasting life is really interesting.
Yeah, you got to be professional up in the booth.
Yeah, can't be cheering on for your team or the other team. It's definitely an interesting dynamic, but it's cool to see what it takes to work in that environment. And I've been very fortunate to experience that the last 3 years. I know that's an area that definitely interested in going into. But to be able to have that, and then also the next week go into the student section and have a great time with my friends, it's a nice balance to have, at least for the next few years.
Well, let's keep focused week one. What do you want to see? Like what do you think you need to see from this Badgers team to kind of build some of that hope for you or that excitement for the fans?
I think it's going to be a really interesting game against Western Michigan because, kind of like last year, you don't really know what to expect with all of these transfers coming in, a lot of these moving and changes coming around. And this year is kind of similar, especially at the quarterback position with Tyler Van Dyke being the starter. He was just named last week. It's going to be really interesting to see how quickly he catches on. Tanner Mordecai struggled a little bit in this first game. I think he threw 2 picks, I believe. And they were struggling against Buffalo, and that was not something that you wanted to see. So with all of these new transfers coming in, I want to see them get up to speed relatively quickly. If they're able to make those adjustments, click, and just do what they need to do, then it should be a good sign, at least for the offensive side. This defensive side, I'm really excited to see this defensive front because I think, outside of the defensive line, obviously losing James Thompson Jr. was a big loss earlier this week, but the linebacker crew and the secondary crew is going to be really interesting. There's a lot of experience. There's a lot of great newcomers coming in as well. And I want to see them click and just get into the groove of things and just dominate on the field. Western Michigan, a formidable foe, especially on offense, but this is a team that Wisconsin should beat pretty handedly. And I want to see that confidence on the field just to carry over into the rest of the season.
You were at the press conference, Luke Fickell's press conference on Monday. What did you get a feel for how concerned the defensive line depth is? Were you able to read between the lines at all when he talked about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he had said that they were going to rotate, I believe, either 5 or 6. And now I think they have this 5 rotation, but there's been a lot of changes. I know on the depth chart that they released on Monday, I believe they only listed 4 of them on there. And I know that there's going to be some rotation in there with Dylan Johnson, the freshman, probably going to get some time. Brandon Lane as well. Those 2 guys weren't named on the depth chart, but they're going to get some time in the rotation. So I think there's definitely a little bit of a concern because that was an area of concern coming into the season. And obviously losing somebody like James Thompson Jr., that is a huge loss for this team. And then hearing that he might not come back at all because of the injury that he had to get surgery, they were saying is going to be a concern. But for this team, it's got to be being able to move forward, being able to work cohesively as a group. And I still think there's a lot of really good players on this defensive line. They just need to go out and prove it.
Anything else that any other underrated storyline week one you're looking for, whether it's offense, defense, maybe a new player that specifically you're watching?
I'm going to give a quick shout out to Max Lofi because I did not know this story until this week, and just seeing what he was able to do coming back from that injury. He was able to play in the game after 1,000 days, and he was named the starting nickelback for this team on Friday. So it's going to be really exciting to see him. I think he's definitely an underrated player. Even Luke Fickell said that his progression from spring camp into fall camp has been astronomical. So I'm really excited to see him get back on the field and really lead this defensive back crew that is probably the deepest that it's been in the last 5 years.
Yeah, that secondary is absolutely loaded. We're going to take a quick break with Krissy Birdsall. I'll come back after our friends of the show. We're going to talk a little bit about what she's got going on, plus students in seats from the perspective of somebody on campus. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at 5 Hour Energy. I talk about this a lot. I have a to-do list. I have several things that I'm trying to get done in life. 5 Hour Energy is there for me to help get those things done, accomplish my tasks after lunch. It's small, it's simple. There's no sugar, which I need a little bit less of that in my life. So that's great for me. Great flavors. And there's a great offer over at 5hourenergy.com. If you put in the number 5, 5hourenergy.com, you can get your 12 or 24 pack today. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. You're going to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th. You can't combine it with other promotions. You can't use it on subscriptions, but it is a great offer to get you some 5 Hour Energy into your life. Just get some of that DIY stuff done. Get that honey-do list stuff done before football starts on Friday. It is a great time to do that over at 5hourenergy.com. Sign up today. All right, let's get Krissy back on. Let's talk about this conversation that, quite frankly, never goes away. It feels like it. I'm 41, right? I've been a Badger fan my whole life, and I feel like this conversation comes up every single year. Students in seats. From your perspective, You're a senior. Where is this at now? Is this never going away?
I don't think it's ever going to go away. I know that the biggest storyline, at least maybe off of the field, is the alcohol sales at Camp Randall. And that was actually brought up on Monday's press conference. Luke Fickell gave a pretty funny answer to that. He was like, well, I can't participate in it, but I'm glad that the fans are able to. And he even joked about maybe it would help getting the students in seats on time for those kickoffs. And I'm really curious to see like how much of an effect is it going to have on the student section? Because yeah, they started it at the Kohl Center. They were doing it at the Field House, I believe, this year as well. And it's going to be interesting to see, is this going to have a really big effect, or is there going to be other changes that they have to make? I know this is a conversation we had last year because students were showing up, 45, 60 minutes after kickoff. And we talked about how the long lines and that there maybe need to be changes with the gates because there's only one gate of 14 to put in 14,000 people, which are all students, and they all show up about 15 minutes before kickoff. So I'm really curious to see if the alcohol sales are going to make any adjustments. But from my perspective, I mean, I always like to show up to the game early. You always get a nice view of the field, even if you're in the end zone. So I'm curious to see. I think this first game is always going to be packed before kickoff
Mhm.
just because it's the first game. There's a lot of excitement. I think Alabama is going to be very similar. It's Alabama, of course. Everybody's going to want to be going to that game. I think the true test is going to be South Dakota in week 2. That's where you're going to see, okay, is this making a change or is it going to be same old, same old?
Is there I feel like students sometimes get a bum rap on this, right? Like it's really easy to turn on a TV, and I've been in Connecticut for like the last 15 years of my life, and the camera pans the end zone. There's no students, and you're like, oh, get in the seats. But your point, there's one entrance. I still don't think people really fully understand how hard it is to get in unless you're getting there really early. And a lot of us weren't getting to places really early when we were 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah, the process is pretty interesting because you go through a security check, then you scan your ticket, then they file you into your section, so LMNO or P, and then you get a physical ticket. Then you have to go up into the stairs, go to that area that you're going into, and then they basically like single file you into your seat. And so it's a little bit of a long process. There's times where I've showed up maybe 5, 10 minutes before kickoff, and I've gone in halfway through the first quarter, and you don't feel like you're there that long because you're walking, you're talking to your friends. Maybe you're stopping for
Mhm.
a Ben's pretzel on the way, but then you go to your seat and you're like, wow, there's already 2 touchdowns being scored and we're almost at the first quarter break. And you just don't even realize how quickly that time flies by. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to see how long that process has been. I'm hoping that on top of the alcohol sales, maybe that will quicken up a little bit because I think that's going to be the major change that's going to get people into their seats at time.
Does it? Do you think? I don't know. College, do they care even? Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, is it a big deal to them to miss a half a quarter of the game?
I think it depends on the person. I mean, there's a lot of rampant football fans that are students here. I mean, a lot of them work at the radio station with me, but you see them everywhere, whether they're talking at a bar, they're talking in the class, they're talking about it, just walking to and from the gym or something with their friends. So there's a lot of big football fans. I think that it maybe not is not as big of a deal to us just because we're younger. We'll know that, hey, if we miss something, we'll catch it on highlights, we'll catch it on Twitter, and it's not going to be the end of the world. But I think it wouldn't say that people don't care about the football games and showing up on time. You obviously want to be there for the full 60 minutes if you can, but if you can't, I mean, the sun's still going to rise and set tomorrow. So I think I think that the care is there, but it's not as like crucial as maybe people think.
Let's talk big picture now, because I think you're right. I don't know if that conversation is going away anytime soon. Next year, when you're on the show, we'll probably talk about it again, and we'll probably be like, "Oh, get in the seats again." What does a successful football season this year for the Badgers look like, in your opinion?
I think with the schedule that they have, it's really going to be hard to determine. You saw with the preseason games, you have this top 25. Florida State's ranked number 10. They lose to Georgia Tech. So don't really put a lot of preseason rankings into stock. I mean, USC was in the top 25, and I'm curious to see if they're going to stay there by the time that the
Mhm.
Wisconsin goes out to Los Angeles to play them because it's going to be really interesting. Same thing with Iowa. They were right on the bubble there. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of season they have. I think for Wisconsin, if you're over 6-6 with this schedule, you make a bowl game. That's a successful season to me, just because the schedule is so difficult this year. You're just playing strong team after strong team after strong team. And the teams that you're playing that maybe aren't as strong, you're playing them on the road. You're playing Iowa at Kinnick Stadium. You're playing Nebraska
Mhm.
at Memorial Stadium. Those are tough games. Those aren't just cupcake teams that you're going to be able to walk over because you're playing in hostile environments. So I have them predicted about 7-5, 8-4 right now. I think if they hit that mark, that's a successful season to me.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that. And I wonder though if fans who maybe don't breathe this as much as you and I or some other people are going to look at a 7-5 year after a 7-5 year after you fired Paul Chryst kind of nominally for going 7-5, right? Do you think the fan who maybe doesn't follow it as close is going to start to get a little frustrated with results?
I could see that happening, but with any new head coach that comes in, I always like the 3-year rule. The first year, it does not matter how good or bad your team is because you're the new coach, you're the new guy coming in. You're not getting the recruits that you might be getting, especially depending on how your program is historically, as we've seen with some of the past programs. But then the second year, okay, you want to see some improvement. And yeah, does 7-5 look like a major improvement? No, obviously on paper, it's the same record, it's all the same, but you have to look a little bit deeper into it. You have to look at the matchups. You have to look at who they're playing. You have to kind of take it all into context because there is so many changes. I think year 3 will be crucial for Luke Fickell. That's going to be where people are going to say, okay, why aren't we 8-4, 9-3, 10-2? And if that doesn't happen, then that's when people might start turning their heads. But I think year 2 right now, you get a little bit of leeway, a little bit of nice attitude, even if you're not having a perfect season.
Our friends of the show over at FanDuel. We've had FanDuel as a sponsor for a long time, America's #1 sports book. There's nothing better than #1, but we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV base plan, you are able to watch every regular season NFL game, every one of them. Let's go. So you bet $5, use FanDuel, and you get that 3-week free trial to gorge yourself on NFL football, which is right around the corner. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to download America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, NFL's here, and there's not a better place to do it than FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's FanDuel.com, promo code locked on. Today's episode is also brought to you by our great friends over at Factor Meals. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to a menu of chef-crafted meals like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Even I can cook it. And y'all know my struggles. I put sugar in burgers and it didn't work out. Factor is here for people like me or just people who are functionally better than me, but are also just really busy, or you want to kickstart your health journey. Factor is incredible. 35 different meals and over 60 different add-ons to choose from every week. You're going to have new flavors to explore. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. That's factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. You're going to use code lockedoncollege50. You're going to get 50% off your first order. Slice your grocery bill in half for your first order. Head over to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. It is an incredible offer to get your subscription going. Man, you haven't met some of the people in my family. Good luck. Good luck with that over Thanksgiving dinner if this is a 6-6 team or 5-6, 5-7 team, whatever it might be. Who are you most excited to play this year? You got some of the Pac-12 schools, older Pac-12 schools coming in, but you still got a Penn State. You got a Bama non-conference. You have an Iowa on the road. Like, who are you most excited to see Wisconsin match up with this year?
If you told me this a year ago, I would have said Alabama easily 100%. I would have loved to see Nick Saban at Camp Randall. I would love to just watch that happen.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
with all of the changes, obviously Kalen DeBoer coming in for them, they're still going to be a really good team. But I think the focus now has shifted to Oregon being the #1 game because there's going to be such a strong team. You have Dylan Gabriel on that team. They've returned a lot of their starters, and they're going to be a really strong team. They're going to be a team that is likely going to make the college football playoff, especially with the 12-team format, and they're going to do probably pretty good, as my prediction is. And if Wisconsin can maybe steal an upset, make it a close game, it's a November matchup, late November matchup. You don't know what the weather is going to be. It could be 60 degrees out, or it could be a snow game. I haven't had a snow game since I've been here. So I think that environment is going to be really fun, and I'm super excited for that one. Alabama is going to be an awesome game too. It's early in the season. If they go 2-0 and Alabama's 2-0, I think that's a very strong chance for College Game Day to come. So that's going to be a whole nother vibe because it's been about 10 years since College Game
Mhm.
Day has been down in the area. And then Penn State is obviously an exciting one. That's the homecoming game. It's Halloween weekend. I think that's a team that Wisconsin could maybe steal from the Nittany Lions. They played them really tough a few years ago. That was actually my first football game ever, a game that they should have won against Penn State. And I think they'll have a really good shot to beat them again.
Yeah, I remember that one well. Frustration abounds.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
Let me ask you this. I was annoyed initially that the Bama game wasn't a night game. That felt like a great opportunity because I think when you it's almost like if you have a house or an apartment or a condo, whatever it is, and you welcome somebody over, you want to put your best foot forward, right? And Camp Randall's best foot is a night game. That environment is insane. But I kind of wonder if Alabama coming into not a sleepier environment, that's the wrong way to put it, but them having to come in early and play might actually play in the Badgers' favor because there's going to be a little less juice in the stadium. Am I crazy in that? And a night game would just be better no matter what? Or is it possible Bama having to come on a road game early actually plays in the Badgers' benefit here?
I think it really depends on what the environment is going to be like. If, game day is here and Fox Big Noon is here and everybody and their mother is out at the pregame tailgates and enjoying
Mhm.
it and going to the stadium early, then that might bode well in the Badgers' favor, even if it's a little bit more of a sleepier environment. But I think a night game absolutely clears the 11 a.m. kickoff. I'm not saying that from personal experience because I'm not a morning person, but I think the night environment and Camp Randall, I mean, I got to see it last year for Nebraska in the student section. I got to see it for Ohio State in the press box. I was doing color for that game, and it is just such a more lively environment. Yeah, it might be a little bit more on like the SEC type of environment that they're used to, but I think that a hostile environment's a hostile environment no matter what, and being able to have that at night would have been a bigger advantage for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think you're probably dead on that one. Last question here on the Badgers. If the Badgers either hit their ceiling or overachieve, what do you think the biggest reason is why? And then if they fall kind of flat, I hate to even put that into existence, but if they don't quite hit the expectations, what do you think the biggest reason is why?
I think it's gonna be on the offense 100% more than the defense this year. I think the defense has the potential to be very good this year, and we talked about the struggles with the defensive line. I think they're gonna be able to figure it out. I have faith in Mike Tressel. I know that last year
Mhm.
wasn't a perfect year, but I have faith that he's gonna be able to get it up to speed. I think this offense is going to be really interesting to see because are we going to see a true air raid this year, or is it going to be more what we saw last year, which was a little bit of a mix between both? Or are we gonna see a reversion back to that run first type of offense that they've had? I mean, Ches Malusi is such a great player, but you have a really deep wide receiver core this year.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of it is going to fall on the hands of Tyler Van Dyke. I have to say, if he can get the ball out to his players, I can see Will Pauling, CJ Williams, Bryson Green, I think is expected to have a standout year just from what I've seen in his tape in the last year. And I think if Tyler Van Dyke can get the ball in their hands and allow them to make the plays, then this could be an offense that could be a 25 points per game, 30 points per game type of offense, which is going to be crazy to see in Wisconsin. But if they're able to do it, they could definitely exceed their expectations. And if they're not able to, then I could see it being very similar to last year.
Yeah, if they could hit close to that 30 mark with the defense, I think we both think they have. They could win 8, 9 games, and it wouldn't shock me. Krissy, as always, you are incredible. Thank you for jumping on. Where can people find what you're doing, and if whatever you'd like to share, kind of what's next for you?
Yeah, so you see my Twitter handle on the bottom there at Krissy Birdsall. I'm basically on every single social media with the same handle. This year, I'm going to be at WSUM. I'll be calling games on the sports stream as well as 91.7 in Madison. I'll have a few shows on there on Tuesdays, as I just found out like 2 minutes before I came in here. I also am on Big Ten Plus, which is the streaming service for some of the other Badger sports. So you might see me on some volleyball, on some basketball, maybe a little bit of hockey. We'll see, to be determined. And then I have some big news coming in the next week. I'm going to be in the Madison area, maybe jumping on some other airwaves. I can't say exactly what I'm doing right now, but it's going to be really exciting.
Oh, that's phenomenal. And when you find out, let us know. We'll retweet it. We'll promote that out of it for sure. She is Krissy Birdsall. I'm Ryan Harings. This is Locked On Badgers. Just a couple days away from opening up the season. Cannot wait. Thank you so much, Krissy. And for everyone listening, we will talk to you tomorrow.